in my head out loud. Let's get into it, let's pick up the flow though. Brought to you by the one they call JoJo. Black, queer, unapologetic. Black, queer, unapologetic. Let's go.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Black, Queer, Unapologetic. I'm JoJo, your host, and today we're going to be diving into a topic that's very personal, a little painful. Oftentimes it can be embarrassing, and for some of us, it is all too familiar. What happens when being unapologetically yourself costs you your job? How do you process that? How do you navigate the aftermath and rebuild a sense of self-worth in a system that wasn't designed for you to thrive? Today, I want to share my own story about being fired, how that impacted me in how I've come to change my perspective on that situation and what I've learned since then. This is for anybody who's ever been told that they don't belong, or they had their authenticity punished, or been told that they were not a fit when they were doing their job. You're not alone, and your story does matter. And so I want to make sure people know about these types of things because they can happen. And so you need to be able to protect yourself if it was to happen to you. Growing up, I was always told that I had to work a lot harder. I grew up playing a lot of sports. I grew up in schools that didn't necessarily have a lot of Black leadership as far as like teachers and things like that. And so growing up, my parents were very hard on me when it came to making sure that I didn't give anybody a reason to punish me or giving anybody a reason to say that I wasn't good enough, and be able to make my own way through things. So you have to try 2-3 times as hard in order to break into different industries to, be that person, that go-to person that is known as a subject matter expert or is the best at their craft, whether that be a sport, whether that be at your job, whether that be a hobby, or anything like that. There's also jokes about queer people that just have money. I see those memes and stuff on Instagram all the time where it's like, where do gay people get all this money from? And my personal opinion about that is that we are often in rooms where people will judge us from first look or first sound. And so they want to, put us into a box. And in order to navigate through that, we just try harder and figure out ways in order to get into those rooms and get into those positions where we can make that money and be able to go on these trips and do things like to enjoy ourselves. Because when you're always being told that you're not good enough or you don't belong in a certain space, the only way to get in is to bust down the door. And so that's what I've been taught to do through just being Black and growing up, knowing that I was queer. I've always had a bunch of side hustles. Before I started, working in the industry that I'm in now, I've always had 2 or 3 jobs and been able to make my ends meet somehow working to those 2 or 3 jobs. And that has not changed. I've always been doing something on the side, whether it's talked about or not, and figuring out a way to make sure that I can take care of myself, whether it's to buy a home, start a business, something like that. So with that said, I will take you back to the moment that this unfortunate event happened to me. I had been working in my field for about 6 or 7 years at that point, and I got an offer from this company. And it was a step down from what I applied for. I was looking for career development. I wanted to go for a higher role. And so the role that I had applied for was that higher role that I wanted. The company decided that they wanted to hire me, but they said that they wanted to hire me at a lower level to start because they wanted me to show that I was capable of doing the work. Mind you, this company had me go through testing. So I had to do like a case study, made me do all these different things. That I met like maybe 15 or 16 people during the interview process. And against my better judgment, after going through all of that, and then them telling me that they wanted to hire me, but they wanted to hire me at a role lower, I accepted the role. And when I think back on that now, they initially didn't see my worth. And so I should have turned that job down, but I did not. And so that was my mistake. I did assume that this place would be a place that I could bring my full self to work. I do have a very bossy, opinionated, domineering personality, but I always try to make sure that I'm being respectful with people. Part of that respect is being direct and straightforward with folks, because when you sugarcoat things, it doesn't do anybody any good. Being honest and upfront is probably the best thing you can do. And it's not necessarily what you say that I believe, it's how you say it. And so getting that point across in a way that is empathetic and honest and approachable. Anyways, I showed up every day at work, brought my authentic, unapologetic self, Black, queer, proud, brought that every day at work. That's who I am. But the truth is that being unapologetically you in certain spaces can make people uncomfortable, especially if they are not familiar with being around people who are like you. And the warning signs were there. Comments about how I expressed myself, microaggressions, subtle sidelining, like keeping me out of meetings that I probably should have been in, bringing me into conversations later than I should have been a part of them. And I ignored those signs, thinking that if I just worked harder, that it would be okay. And spoiler alert, it was not. I was working so hard that I actually ended up making a mistake at work. And once I quickly noticed that I had made that mistake, I owned up to it and explained how it happened, and also how I plan to prevent any accident or mistake like that happening again. And one day soon after, I walked into a meeting expecting the usual, and instead I walked out without a job, fired. And the reasons were just cloaked in corporate jargon, such as you're not a culture fit, we're not right person for the position or the team dynamic. And let's be real, the friction was between me and my boss, and it was basically about my Blackness and the way that I moved through the business and my role and my queerness, and being unapologetic about the fact, like, yes, I did make a mistake. This is how I fixed it. It will not happen again. And being transparent about that. I didn't make any excuses for making a mistake. People are human and everybody makes mistakes. I'm fully aware of that. But the second I did make a mistake, I was out the door. That was not the same treatment that other employees had gotten in the past. And so I can only think that, well, what's the difference between me and those other employees? Well, I mean, the writing's on the wall. So I would like to say that I handled it gracefully, and the truth is I did not. When we did have that meeting, I didn't go as off as I probably would have in a different setting, but I was very clear with how I felt about the whole situation. I felt that the situation was also very unprofessional, and I communicated that to the folks that were there. But the truth is that this situation broke me, because after growing up and being told that if you work harder, you can do these things, and you just have to be, pretty much perfect. And the second I made one mistake, I lost my job. And this is the first time I've ever gotten fired in my life. So I was angry, I was humiliated, and I felt really lost, because then I realized, that I was putting too much value on my job. The value of my job and how much I was getting paid, and the role and the level and the title were all things that I was using to define myself, which those things don't matter, like jobs and titles and income and all that stuff. It changes all the time. It's very fluid. Then also questioning myself, was I too much? Was I not enough? The questions just spiraled, and for a moment I really doubted myself, and I consider myself a very confident person. And in this moment, I was doubting myself heavily. But this is what I realized, is that it wasn't about my worth. It was about a system that isn't ready for people like me in this specific situation. It was it's about a company that was not ready for a person like me in that role to move through that business. Someone who doesn't allow themselves to shrink or to conform and comes into the door being who they are and is a team player and works with folks, but also because of who you are, people are intimidated or think that you're confrontational or they're afraid to have a conversation with you. And so instead of working towards that, they just choose to get rid of you because it's too difficult to be inclusive or to learn about someone who is not like yourself. And so the realization is that this was actually the beginning of my healing process, because then I took a lot of value off the job, off the level, off the title, off how much money I make, and was able to really look inward and make sure that that never happened to me again. And I want to be clear, this isn't just about me. It's about the countless Black and queer people or anybody from any marginalized community, whether you're a woman, you're a mother, pregnant or whatever it is, that has faced discrimination at work and we're told to just be grateful or just to play the game. It's about systems that punish authenticity while rewarding mediocrity when it fits the mold. But let me just say this. Being fired for being unapologetically yourself isn't a failure, especially if you're not being disrespectful, if you're not being rude, mean, causing legitimate problems in the workplace. Being fired for being unapologetically yourself is not a failure. It's a reflection of a system that wasn't worthy of you in the first place. If you've been there, I see you, I hear you, and I want you to know that your worth isn't tied to someone else's discomfort with your existence. That's their problem. They have to go and get over that. They're the ones that have to live with that. They're the ones who are choosing to be narrow-minded and hire people who only look like them, who only have their vision, and do not think outside the box or challenge their opinions or viewpoints and conform to the way that they want things done. And unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. And so you have to make a choice. Do I want to stay here or do I want to leave? If they choose to get rid of you, I mean, you don't really have a choice in that matter. But you can say what you have to say and walk out the door. So now you're probably thinking, if this does happen to me, how do I rebuild? And for me, it started with finding my community, people who saw me, celebrated me, and reminded me of my power. I focused on what I could control, my mindset, my boundaries, and my next steps. Create a plan for yourself. Honestly, I think everybody should always have a plan. Nothing in this world is permanent. So have an exit plan. If you were to lose your job tomorrow, what are you going to do? Do you have savings? Do you have a list of companies that you would like to apply to? Do you want to do a career change? You want to go back to school? Like, what do you want to do? Make sure that you have your next steps outlined, and I wouldn't wait for something to happen for you to have that. You should always have that plan in place, whether it's financially or whether it's just an action plan of what those next steps might look like. And if you're navigating through something similar, just know that you do have the right to be yourself at work. You don't have to go and pretend to be something you're not. But again, I want to emphasize that this is about being who you are as a person. This doesn't mean going into rooms being disrespectful or mean or rude, or just literally causing problems. But if you are coming in there and you're just being yourself, and yourself is causing problems, you enter a room and the energy shifts and people don't like it. If you walk into a space that doesn't make room for you, that's their loss. It's not yours. That's not your problem. It is not your problem to make people like you. You either can do the job professionally and work together with other people, or you can't. It's not about, I don't like the way this person did this, but did the job get done? And so you can't control other people's behavior. Really just take that out of the scenario and not make it about you, because again, that's their problem, not yours. So I'm going to close this out and just say, if this episode resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Where in your life have you been made to feel small? And how have you reclaimed space for yourself? I think that's important. I'd love to hear stories about if people have faced this before. If you face something similar, reach out, share your experience, and let me know how this episode spoke to you. Thank you for listening to Black Queer Unapologetic. Remember that you're not alone, and you're not too much, and you're always enough. And until next time, stay Black, stay queer, and if you are neither, then always stay unapologetic. Bye.